one of the most courageous human beings that has been on the planet that we know of. Every person in this room has the opportunity every day to make a difference in the world.
I did a knife and clean book.
And we all think about it many times during the day. Should I speak up when somebody's being mean? And sometimes we have the courage and we do it. And sometimes we think, oh, something bad might happen to me. Somebody might say something bad to me, and then sometimes we don't. But inside each one of you is an amazing seed for change. All of you, raise your hand, just go like this and let me know, did you learn about Martin Luther King today or not? Hands down. So you know a lot about him. I want to talk for just a second about him as a visionary. Because what a visionary is someone who can see the world being better than it is, and then you make that happen. And there's a book that I keep in the office. It's always there because it's so important to me, and it's about vision. It's called The Spyglass. And The Spyglass is about a kingdom that was no longer beautiful. It was once great, but now the buildings were falling down. The farms were small. They didn't grow enough food even for the people there. And the poor villagers often went hungry. People were so sad because it wasn't a very, very wonderful kingdom anymore, that they didn't play music and they didn't do art. And the king didn't even look like a king anymore. He dressed kind of like this, and he didn't have his castle all decorated. They really felt like their world was not a very good place. But right next door was still a kingdom that was beautiful and wonderful, and that made them even more upset because they would look over and see that the other kingdom, people had beautiful farms, and they had horses, and they had, good lives, and they thought, oh, but we don't have this good life. Well, one stormy night, there was a knock on the door of the king's castle. And the king came to the door, and the man said, can I spend the night here? And the king said, well, this isn't a hotel. This isn't an inn. Yes, And he said, but I still need a place to spend the night. And the person who answered the door said that this is the king's castle. And the man said, this is the castle? This does not look like a king's castle. So the servant let him in. And the man met the king and said, you don't look like a king either. And the king told him, yes, we've fallen on hard times. Our village is very poor. We have almost nothing. And the man said, no, you're lacking only one thing. If you give me supper and let me spend the night here tomorrow, I'll show you why your kingdom is failing. The king thought, and then he said, okay, you can spend the night, have some supper. And he fed the man all the good food that he had. And in the morning, the old man came to the king in his room, and he said, you've lived up to your part of the bargain. Now I will live up to mine. Follow me. And the king followed the old man to the castle balcony. There, the old man brought out a long spyglass, like where you can see a long distance. And he looked through it over the land, and then a huge smile came over his face. And he handed the spyglass to the king. Look, the king looked out through the glass, and he could see beautiful farms and lots of vegetables and houses that looked beautiful and people working in the fields. And he said, this is a trick. And the man said, no, look again. And then he said, oh yeah, we're looking at the next kingdom, not our kingdom. And he said, look again. And he looked again, he realized he recognized his fields, and he recognized the people of his land, but they were looking like they were very prosperous and happy. They were singing, and they had beautiful crops. What greatness! I see, said the king. And the old man said, you have seen what might be. Now go and make it so. After 2 harvests, I will return for my spyglass. And so the king was given the spyglass. And he went out through the land, and when he came upon farmers and there was their plants were hardly growing and their houses were falling down, he looked through the spyglass and he would get this smile on his face because he could see that the house was beautiful and there were flowers in the garden, there were things growing, and he'd call the farmers over and say, look. And at first the people would look and say, what is this? This is magic. And he would say, no, this is what can be. People said, oh, but our soil is too old. And the king would go over and start pulling weeds and say, if we work hard toward that vision, we can make it happen. And so the people would come and start helping him pull the weeds. The next time the king rode out in the car, he found another farmer who was just weeding at the dirt. He couldn't make it work, and he showed him the eyepiece. And the same thing happened. When he came to the church that was just falling down rocks, the king brought out the spyglass and saw a beautiful cathedral. And he spoke to the people there. See for yourself. And when they looked through the spyglass, the decaying buildings were no longer there. They were adorned with beautiful sculptures of saints and cherubs. I have seen a vision, said the minister who was looking through it. You have seen what might be, said the king. Now make it so. Day by day, the king went out until he visited all the people in the kingdom, and everyone saw what could be if only they would work toward it. That same year, there was a huge harvest. The farmers filled their wagons and barns with grain. The wagon builders built more wagons because the farmers needed them. The millers made more grain for the flour. For the first time, for as long as the villagers could remember, there was more than enough to eat. Music and dancing again filled the streets. Old buildings were repaired. New buildings rose, including the beginning of the most majestic cathedral in the land. As promised, 2 years later, the old man came and said, I need to take my spyglass. And the king said, no, we need the spyglass. And the old man said, no, you've seen now. If you can vision a better world, and you're willing to work to make the world better, you can change anything. And that is the story of the way Martin Luther King changed our world. I was just a child. And people thought the world could not change in that way. But he said, I have a dream. I can see it. And if we work toward it, we can make the world differently. And even though it seemed like that couldn't happen, he inspired people to work toward it. And the world has changed tremendously. One of the huge pieces of having the courage to keep working towards something when you have a dream, and it's hard, and people are telling you it can't work, one of the ways that you keep going is through music. And Martin Luther King and all of the visionaries who have helped us change the world used music to get people to be able to do what they thought they couldn't do. When they got tired or when they got afraid, then they would sing. So Verena has a few songs, and she's going to lead us.
You have an orange book right here.
You're going to show those in just a second.
Oh,
The first one is We Shall Overcome. So here are the words. We're going to, everyone who knows it, please join in. This is a song that they would sing over and over. And I sang it when I was helping with causes like this, so that we have the courage not to give up. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Really with feeling, we're going to sing it about 3 or 4 times. We shall time, we are not afraid.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
Why no candles?
We have candles because today is the birthday, the day that Martin Luther King came to be on this planet as a little tiny baby. And so the candles are to show that he brought light to us. He brought us a new vision and has given us a better world.
And we have to do recording books now.
And I think that Laura, would you stand up and tell us about your book?
Sure. Well, we have been studying Martin Luther King Jr., and we also have been studying what a biography is. So we decided that we're going to make a homemade book, an accordion-style book, and the kids did a mini biography, and they also did collage. That's sort of an artistic way to celebrate Martin Luther King. So we have 4 kids from my class that would like to kind of share something about their mini biographies, and I'll have the rest of you in just a second stand up and do a quick little show. So we'll start with Rio.
Okay.
Go ahead and share one fact about Martin Luther King that you know.
Martin Luther King was 19. He became a minister. He could not understand why there was special rules just for black people.
Martin's father and grandfather were both ministers.
Martin?